Hi, in this video we're going to discuss exactly how TM works. We're going to discuss what the simple secret is that, has been forgotten over time. I'm going to share you some of my experiences as a transcendental meditation teacher. And we're going to discuss how soon you can actually expect effects when you learn the technique. We're going to discuss how it's taught, the exact teaching procedure, because that is a part of the secret. In this video, we're going to assume that you watch the Science of Spirituality videos because, I'm not going to go too deeply into the effects of transcendental meditation because we discussed that in the Science of Spirituality videos already. So this is just more like the practical things. Already, as you probably know from the videos, my name is Joachim Klaas. I am the author of the book and, I made the Science of Spirituality videos. And so I have been a teacher for 16 years. I taught 750 people. These days, I generally only teach either VIP courses or a public course, a normal regular TM course once in a while in the city where I'm based to produce the videos that I'm making, which is in Lexington, Kentucky at the moment. But I did want to give this quick introduction into the actual technique itself. There's a lot of questions about the TM technique that I'm regularly getting. And rather than answering them one by one, I decided to just have a Zoom call once or twice a week where people who want to ask more questions can just log on to, and then we can discuss it. In the Zoom call, we're also going to discuss the last couple of practical points that you need to know if you ever want to consider learning the technique. Okay. As we've seen in the video, there's two perspectives of transcending. One is we can look at transcending as, the wave merging with the ocean. If we are individual waves on an ocean of consciousness, then the wave merging with the ocean is really the mind just coming back home. The other perspective, and, we get to experience that field of consciousness, the direct experience of the field that interconnects all of us. That's one explanation. The other perspective is that transcending is simply being yourself. We've seen in the videos that, when we normally go through life, you wake up in the morning and the moment you open your eyes, you step on a train of one thought after another and you think this, you have this thought, you have to do this, you observe this. Your whole life is observing things, doing things, and thinking things, which means that our conscious attention is always drawn away from from our true selves, towards something, an object of that we see, do, or think. What is transcending? It is that state where the mind comes into a state of complete silence, which means we're seeing, we're doing, we're thinking absolutely nothing, but where the mind stays completely conscious and alert. So it's not like the silence that we experience during sleep. When the mind is asleep, then we're also completely silent. This is a state where, we are completely silent, yet remain completely conscious and alert. And that's the big secret of transcending. And that works for being yourself. It also works for, as we saw, the wave merging with the ocean. It's the wave that becomes completely silent, which becomes the ocean, but you have a completely conscious experience of it. That's what transcending is. Now, how do you do that? Well, seeing or doing nothing is pretty easy. You just close your eyes and you sit in the chair and you close your eyes and then you're doing it. But thinking nothing, how do you do that? Have you ever tried to think nothing? It sounds almost impossible, right? Because, well, the moment you try to think nothing, the moment you do that, you basically start thinking. And that's the big secret of meditation that has gotten lost. The fact is that we started trying to do that. And today there's hundreds of ways to meditate, different ways to bring that mind, to try to bring that mind to a state of silence. You can focus on your breath, you can focus on a thought, you can listen to an app, you can concentrate on the sound. There's many different ways. But they all involve doing something because they're all involved trying to make the mind quiet. And the more you try, the more you only keep the mind active. You'll probably get some relaxation, but you actually prevent the mind from going to that state of transcending. That's what we discussed in the videos already. So how do you get the mind there? What is the big secret? Well, to explain that, we're gonna show display the mind as an ocean. We're gonna present the mind as an ocean, but this way as kind of a cross section of an ocean, where the top part of the ocean, where the waves are active, that we're going to say is the conscious part of our mind, the part of our mind that we can consciously experience. And everything else is what we call the subconscious mind. It's outside of the reach of our conscious experience. Now, whenever we have a thought, we can compare that thought like a little bubble of air that rises up from the bottom of the ocean. It rises up towards the surface and it becomes, more bigger and bigger and bigger. And at one point, the bubble of air, the air bubble reaches the surface and it pops. And the moment that air bubble pops, that's the moment where suddenly you can consciously experience a thought. That's when the thought is suddenly there. You have no idea where it comes from. Just suddenly you're thinking something. Yeah. What we're going to do, but that, before that bubble of air that reaches the surface, before that thought reaches our conscious mind, it has gone through an entire process of development in what we call our subconscious mind. So what we're going to do with TM is we're going to experience a completely natural state of development of a thought, but we're going to do it in the reverse order. So we're going to start thinking a particular thought, from the normal thinking level of the mind, and then we're going to experience that thought on finer and finer and finer levels until we bring the mind to that state of complete silence. And how do we do that? Well, there's two things that you'll basically learn when you learn this technique. The first is you're going to learn a particular sound, and that sound is called a mantra. And the mantra, it's two qualities to it. It is a meaningless sound, so there's no meaning to it, because the moment the sound would have a meaning, then your mind starts to wander on the meaning, and that will actually only keep it on the surface of the mind. So there's no meaning, so nothing that the mind can hold on to. But the sounds, they're not random sounds either. These sounds are particularly tailored to our nervous systems. And that's based on a knowledge that's thousands of years old. And there's a knowledge that there's specific sounds for specific nervous systems. So when you learn this technique, before you learn, your teacher is going to give you a little form to fill out, kind of a survey. And your answer is just a couple of questions. And based on that survey, based on that form, your teacher will know which sound to select for you. And the consequence of that is that when you have the right sound matched to the right nervous system, the consequence of that is that the sound's going to have kind of a pleasing and enjoyable quality to think it. And that's going to be an important part of the process. But the mantras themselves have been available for thousands of years in books. Today you'll probably find them somewhere if you can look hard enough. The mantras are not the big secret, because the mantras have been available for thousands of years, and still the technique to transcend has gotten lost for thousands of years. The secret is not so much in the mantras, but in the second part that you'll learn when you learn TM, and it is the right way to use those mantras. If we just take the mantras, and we know that then it's not going to work, and we know that because it's been researched. When you remember the research that we showed in the Science of Spirituality videos, this was a research done at Stanford University. It was the largest meditation research that's ever been done, a meta-analysis of 140 different meditation studies. And what they found was, already in the early 1970s, when TM first came out, there was a couple of guys who thought, why don't we take the mantras from TM and we'll just, we'll teach the mantras, and then everybody can get the effects that people have when they learn TM. And that's clearly not what happens, because this is what you see here, the mantra meditation, that is very clearly, not, the effects that you get from a mantra meditation, but you just use mantras, but you don't know how to use them, you use them incorrectly. It's actually, placebo had a stronger effect. Placebo means it's better to just sit on a chair or sit in the couch with your eyes closed. That has a stronger effect than trying to meditate with mantras and not doing the right way. Why? Because if you're not doing it right, you're going to be, again, doing something. You're just going to take those mantras and concentrate on them, and you're not going to get any effect whatsoever. So The mantras are not the big secret. The big secret is the exact way how to use them. And how exactly does that work? Well, we've just said the meditation techniques today don't work to transcend because they all involve doing something. So the trick is to let it happen naturally, you know, because if you do something, doing something is always involves, you know, trying to force the mind to be silent. For example, you focus on your breath, right? I'm sure a lot of people have tried that already. You focus on your breath, you close your eyes, you focus on your breath. Are you going to get some relaxation? Yes, no doubt about it. But what you're doing is you're keeping the mind forced on one point of attention, your breath in this case, and you force the mind to stay there. And that's unnatural for the mind. The mind doesn't like to be forced, so it's going to fight against it. And what happens is the moment you let go of the concentration, you notice you wander off and you start thinking about something else. And you say, no, 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 wait, I have to focus, I have to concentrate, and you go back to your breath, right? That's not the way to do it. The way to do it, and that's the big secret that has gotten lost, and it's really remarkable that it's gotten lost because it's so simple. The way to do it is not to force the mind to be quiet, but to use the most fundamental desire that every single person in this world has, to use that to let the mind go there by itself. And what is our most fundamental desire? The deepest desire that every single in the world has, it is basically the desire for happiness. You know, think about it. Think about what is the deepest thing that drives us to do whatever we do is we want to feel happy, right? And some people think they'll only be happy if they're rich and famous, and other people don't want any of that. They just want a nice house in the middle of nature and, you know, a happy family, and that will make them happy. Different people are looking for different things, but fundamentally, we're all looking for the same thing. You know, the mind just wants to be happy. It's our most fundamental desire. So we're going to use that quality. And I'm going to give you a very simple explanation, a very simple example of how that works. Say you're driving in your car and you're listening to the radio, and, you know, the news is on. And, you know, the news is on, and the news is not very enjoyable these days. But, you know, you're kind of listening to it. But then suddenly, your window is half open because it's warm outside. And suddenly another car is passing you. And in that other car, suddenly your favorite song ever is playing on the radio. Now, where is your attention going to go? It's going to go to that song, right? And think about it, you did not have to make any effort to let your mind go to your favorite song. You know, the mind went there completely by itself, completely effortlessly, completely naturally, because that is the mind's nature. The mind's nature is always to be drawn to a field of, to an area where there is more happiness, right? That is what we're going to use with TM. So we said you're going to learn a specific sound. And what you're then going to learn, and we'll discuss exactly how that learning process works later, but what you're then going to learn is you're going to learn how to use that sound. You're going to how to use it so that you repeat it in your mind, just in silence. You just sit with your eyes closed and you just repeat the thought. And you're going to learn to use it, that you repeat it, but without concentrating on it, without making any effort. Basically, you're going to learn to keep the mind active by repeating a particular sound, but without controlling it and without steering the mind in a particular direction. Now, when you do those two things, you keep it active, but you don't control it, then you give the mind the opportunity to go where it wants to go naturally. And then we come back to that mantra, to that sound quality, and the quality that there is some pleasing quality to experience a mantra at a deeper level. And that's what will happen. The mind will automatically, you know, think the sound at a deeper level, and it will go deeper because that's its nature. It's enjoyable to go there if we don't control it, right? So if we let the mind keep the mind active by repeating a sound, but you let the mind choose its own direction. And then the mind will choose to go more quiet, more quiet, to more quiet, and you bring the mind to that state of complete transcendence. And this is why everybody can learn to transcend. I've thought over 750 people, and I don't think I've had a single case where it didn't work, right? Why? Because to learn this technique, there's really only two conditions. The first condition is that you can think a thought, and that generally is not a very hard condition, right? Everybody can think a thought, right? Second condition is that your mind is also looking for happiness. You know, I think that's generally also not a problem. I don't think there's a single person in the world that wakes up in the morning with the thought like, I hope I'm really going to be unhappy today. No, of course not. That's why it works with everyone. That's why everyone can learn to transcend, because those are the only two conditions. If you do it right, anyone can learn to transcend. And most people, I would say the vast majority of people, will have a clear experience of transcending from their very first sitting. You know, again, you can't promise anything. Everybody is different, but that's the general experience. And you know, the moment from the very first experience of transcending, we start to develop what we discussed in the videos. We start to develop our full potential, and all these areas of life start to change. Now, how quick those changes will happen is different with everybody. And, you know, we can never make a specific promise because everybody has a different nervous system. But I can give you some statistics, you could say, of what my experience is as a teacher. In my experience, out of 10 people that will learn TM, 8 or 9 people will have a clear effect within 2 weeks of practicing. A clear effect meaning that they notice a clear change in their lives, you know. And I would say 5 to 7 people will even notice a difference within the first 3 days of learning. That's how powerful it is. And then we've got two extremes. That's in general my experience as a teacher. Out of 10 people that learn, you know, 8 or 9 will have an experience in a clear change in 2 weeks, and you've got two extreme experiences. One extreme is that people don't really notice a change after 2 weeks of practice. The other extreme is what I call the miracles. You know, people who typically have been suffering from a particular problem, sometimes for years, and they meditate 2 or 3 days and the problem is gone. And as a teacher, you know, typically my experience, 1 out of 10 people that learn will fall in that category. Yeah. And I can tell you quite a few stories. I'm not going to do that here in this video. What I'll do is I'll record a separate video, but you'll see that below on the website below this one, where I'll just share a couple of my experiences for a few minutes. I don't want to, make this video too long, but if people are interested and they want to hear some of the more, miraculous experiences that I've seen as a teacher, then you can watch that other video underneath it. But the main question is, okay, well, if there's such an extreme range of experiences, does that then mean that TM works better for some people than for others? No, it works the same for everybody, but people are different. And in the videos, Science of Spirituality videos, we discussed stress as kind of like a backpack that we carry with us that's filled with rocks, right? And every stressful experience, especially intensely stressful experiences, is like a rock that comes into our backpack until the weight becomes too much and it starts to disrupt the normal functioning of our nervous systems. Now, everybody has a different backpack. And what we'll see is some people have a backpack, like you see here on the left, where, maybe there's a couple of rocks, small rocks in the bottom, and a couple of big rocks on top. And they start to meditate, and the big rocks go out, and those are the ones that really create a serious disturbance in our normal functioning. So a couple of times transcending, and these rocks are gone, and life is completely different. That's usually the miracle case. The other extreme is, say that some people have a backpack with a couple of rocks in the bottom, and there's a whole bunch of thousands of small rocks on top. And when they learn TM, the body first takes off the small rocks on the top before it can get to the deeper rocks in the bottom. And, if it's a couple of thousands of small rocks and they meditate for 2 weeks, it can be that maybe they don't really notice any big spectacular changes, right? It doesn't, the TM technique works the same. You transcend and the body will start removing these rocks. The experiences that people have depend on how the rocks are structured and how they're coming out. That's why we can never make any specific promises. What we can do is show you the scientific research. Scientific research generally is done on a 3-month period. Because, when people have been meditating for 3 months, no matter how the rocks are organized, people generally notice a big change no matter what, right? The people that don't notice the difference after 3 months is, in my experience, is less than 1%, right? But so everybody is different. Now, what I can tell you is that the vast majority of people, this will be the experience. And, here we visualize it as rocks on top versus the bottom. But that's not, of course, it's just an analogy. What we see is the vast majority of people, when they learn to transcend, from their first experience of that deep state of physical rest, the body will start to remove the rocks that we carry with us. The body will start to remove tensions that are accumulated somewhere. And the body generally goes for the biggest rocks first. Why? Because those are the things, the body knows exactly where all the disturbing elements are. And the moment you give it a chance and you expose it to that deep rest, the moment the body will remove the rocks. And generally it does go for the biggest ones first. That's why, somewhere between 5 and 7 people out of 10 that learn TM, my experience, will notice an effect after 3 days. Again, no promises, but that's my experience, right? Some people, it takes longer. They have to be a little bit more patient. Some people, if they really carry 1 or 2 extremely heavy rocks with them, those are usually the miracles. Those are the most, generally my experience is that the deeper somebody's in trouble, the more fun they are as a TM student, because those are the ones who usually carry big rocks with them. And, those are the ones who notice the biggest change. That's why we saw that in the Science of Spirituality videos, we saw that research with PTSD patients, war veterans that were suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. These are typically, war veterans who've gone to a few really, really extremely traumatic experiences. So they carry a few extremely big rocks with them that is disturbing everything, is disturbing their whole life. We saw 9 different problem scales that they all had. They were all pretty severe on both anxiety, depression, insomnia, alcoholism, and et cetera, et cetera. So just a couple of rocks were causing all these problems at the same time. And what we saw also was that 3 months of psychotherapy didn't do anything to change it, right? Because psychotherapy is, it can help with some people, I'm not saying that, but it is still a superficial treatment. TM, within 3 months, 70% of the veterans were completely healed. So that is, you could say that's a miracle, given that PTSD is considered incurable. But that is exactly what happens. Just remove the rocks and everything starts changing. Right? So again, the video below, I'll share with you some of my personal experiences with that particular case. Now, another question that I get very often is, even if people have full confidence in the transcendental meditation technique that, it will probably do what we promised it will do, a lot of people still have doubts about themselves. And one of the questions I get most often is, well, yeah, okay, if I learn this, am I going to have the time and discipline to actually practice it? Because if you learn it, you're supposed to practice it 20 minutes twice a day. And people have busy lives. So that's usually the first question. Yeah, but am I going to be able to find the time to do this? And I put a picture here of a fitness machine, of a couple of fitness machines, because I'm sure a lot of you have had the experience that, you say, oh, I need to exercise more. So you know what we're going to do? We're going to spend, a significant investment in getting all these fitness machines, and then we're going to start exercising and working out. And generally, what happens with, a large percentage of cases of people who do this is that after a couple of months, it kind of ends up like this, right? So a lot of people have the question, like, is TM going to be the new fitness machine? Am I going to make a significant investment to learn? Because yeah, it is a significant investment. And then end up not doing it. Well, there's two differences that, I mean, obviously it's your life and, you have to decide this for yourself. And there's no point taking the course unless you really do want to take it seriously. And not everybody is ready to learn this technique. The people who are ready are generally the people who really have a very deep desire to have life go differently, to live life better. You know, that is the first criteria to learn. But there are two differences between TM and, say, just another fitness machine. One is that it's enjoyable to do. And that makes a big difference. I don't know if you remember, in the Science of Spirituality videos, we showed you that graph that during transcendental meditation, serotonin significantly increased, which means that it's our happiness hormones. We said transcending is ultimately giving our mind the chance to go look for a source of happiness deep inside of you. And that is a very enjoyable experience, generally. Now, if something is enjoyable to do, that makes it a lot easier to have the discipline to actually do it. Why do people generally fail in their fitness challenge? Is because you kind of have to make a short-term sacrifice of your happiness right now in order to have a long-term gain. It's like, okay, now I have to go fitness for 20 minutes instead of doing what I would really like to do, watch television or do something else. But so the long-term gain will be that maybe in the future I'll be healthier or something like that. And generally, making a short-term sacrifice for a long-term gain generally doesn't work. That's why you call it discipline, you need it. But for most people that learn TM, their TM session will actually be the experience that they look most forward to during the day, because it's so enjoyable to do. And that makes it a lot easier to have the discipline. The other thing is that this is not something where you have to make a short-term sacrifice. You invest 20 minutes twice a day in order to maybe have a long-term gain in a couple of months. This experience is so profound and so powerful that you'll actually get the return of your investment right away. And that also makes it a lot more appealing to do it. And generally, when people learn TM, when they practice twice a day, most people, everybody has their own agenda, of course, during the day, but most people will practice the first time in the morning when they wake up, and the second time in the afternoon or evening when they come back from work, say. Now, the first time in the morning, that means that you're going to have to wake up, say, half an hour earlier than you normally do. And I don't think I've ever met a single person that's excited about that idea. Like, oh my God, half an hour earlier than I already do. And it probably will be a challenge the first week to 2 weeks, to wake up half an hour earlier. And then I would say the vast majority of people who learn TM will start to notice something, that waking up that half hour earlier actually isn't nearly as hard as they thought it would be. And that's related to the deep rest that we saw, that during the experience of transcending, the body really experiences a deep state of rest, far deeper than sleep. And that deep state of rest causes us to, remove the rocks from our backpack. And one of the first things that the vast majority of people notice when they learn TM is that the quality of their sleep improves. People who have sleeping problems generally notice a very big change in that direction. Again, no promises, not everybody, but generally that is what we see. But even people that don't necessarily have sleeping problems, they find that the quality of the sleep improves by that much, that generally they need less sleep. That waking up that half hour earlier is really not nearly as hard as they thought it would be. So that's the first one. So you kind of, if the quality of your sleep improves and you kind of need less sleep, you can wake up earlier. Well, then you get an immediate return of your investment. Plus, of course, you have more energy and more clarity and more creativity during the day. That's the other part of the equation. But the other one, the next meditation, generally people do that in the evening or late afternoon when they come home. Well, now most people when they come home, they notice two things. The batteries are empty. You're kind of low on energy, and the backpack is full. Whatever stress you accumulated during the day, you kind of carry with you at home, right? So you could almost consider that second meditation where you come home from work after in the evening. Consider it like taking a shower for your mind. It's you wash away. You just sit down for 20 minutes, and two things will happen. You're going to recharge your batteries, so that you have a lot more energy afterwards. And you're going to wash away all the stress that you accumulated during the day, right? And that really also has a remarkable effect that you almost get a complete return of investment right away there too. Because yes, you spend 20 minutes after you come home in that silence, but afterwards you have so much more energy and clarity that, the rest of your evening is much more efficient, right? I once had a lady that learned TM, and she asked me, she was a HR manager from a very big company. She was responsible for 2,000 people. And she asked me, is it okay if I meditate only once a day? And I said, well, it's your life. You do what you want, but why would you want to do that? He said, well, it's simple. My morning meditation, okay, I'm very determined. I'll wake up half an hour earlier. But my afternoon or my evening meditation, I just don't see how I'm going to fit that in because I work every evening until at least 9 o'clock in the evening. And if I then come home and then I have to meditate, well, then there's nothing left in my evening. I just don't see how I can fit it in. I said, okay, good. Can we make a deal? I told her. Can you promise me that if I teach you that you'll take 1 week where every day at 4 in the afternoon, you block half an hour in your agenda? Just book a meeting with yourself, because that's essentially what it is. Just block it out in your agenda and meditate 20 minutes there and see what happens. And so she did that. And after a week, she came back for a follow-up session. And she said, it was it was amazing. I did exactly as you asked. And what I noticed was that, the next 4 or 5 hours that I worked, my efficiency was twice as high and I got twice as much done. Because usually you're working until 9 o'clock, but usually, 4 or 5 in the afternoon, that's when the batteries start draining and you feel tired and your concentration is less and you start making mistakes and then you spend the rest of your evening fixing your mistakes. Now I meditate at 20 minutes and the rest of my evening is so much more efficient that I generally tend to get home sooner, right? So she got an immediate return of investment, 20 minutes break, but then the next 4 hours she could work twice as efficiently. So that's what I mean, that people get an immediate return of investment. That's what makes this technique so beautiful. So yeah, will you have the time and discipline? It's probably not nearly as difficult as you may think. Okay, let's go to actually the learning process. How do you learn TM? Well, generally there's quite a number of sessions involved, and it differs a little bit. There's a variation that mainly depends on you, but this is the general course structure. The learning process itself starts with a personal instruction. That means that you sit down with your TM teacher one-on-one. Takes about a 1 hour session, and in that session your TM teacher is going to show you the mantra, show you how it's done, and your teacher will guide you to that first experience of transcending. And the first time, that has to be under guidance. And the reason why it works with everyone is because TM teachers are trained to do that. TM teachers are trained to guide anyone from whatever personal situation they're in, and everybody is different, to guide them from that personal situation, the personal state of mind, towards that experience of transcending. And that's why we said in the videos that, to become a TM teacher is the equivalent of a 1-year full-time training course, because it really involves a lot of stuff that a teacher has to learn. But that's why it works with everyone. So your teacher is going to, give you your mantra, guide you through the procedures, and give you the instructions of how to do it. But for the rest, we're not going to do much. We're just going to send you home. We'll give you the first experience of transcending and then send you home. And then you'll be meditating at home. Now, one of the other reasons that it works for almost everyone in the first session, when you're sitting with your teacher, is because during that first session, you're completely innocent. You have basically no idea what's going to happen. And it's kind of supposed to be like this. It's kind of designed like this. Because if you would know in advance, now my teacher is going to give me this instruction, and now he's going to say this, or now and she's going to say this, well, then when your teacher would do that, your intellect would be working, and that would actually prevent the natural process from taking place. So the fact that you don't know what's going to happen during that personal instruction means that it can happen completely naturally without any intellectual interference. But when you go home afterwards and you do your first meditation session at home, generally the experience is that it will still work, but it will not be quite the same as the first time. And that's a completely normal experience. Why? Because now you do know what's going to happen. And now the mind starts to work, and that's where expectations start to come. Right? Now you have expectation. You say, ooh, that was such an enjoyable experience there in the TM Center. Ooh, I want to have that experience again. Now, the moment you say, I want to have that experience again, there's going to be a part of you that's going to try to have that experience again. And the moment you start trying, that's the moment when, it's no longer natural, and we actually prevent the process of transcending. But you have one big advantage here, and that is that once you've been to that experience of transcending under the guidance of your teacher, that experience is now in your memory. And once that experience is there, the mind itself wants to go back so badly that even the biggest control freak in the world cannot stop it anymore. And that is exactly what you'll see. That it may not be exactly the same as the first meditation in the TM Center when you meditate at home the second time. And it may be a little bit more, I would say more difficult. It will take a little longer maybe, because now your mind is starting to work, but it will still work. Generally, everybody has different experiences, obviously, but generally that's what the experience is. Now, but it's good, you meditate at home a few times, and then the next day, the day after the personal instructions, and in fact, the next 3 days, we come back to the TM Center, and we'll do follow-up sessions. These are generally, between 1.5 and 2.5 hours, I would say. Depends kind of on from one session to the next. And then, during the follow-up sessions, the personal instruction is always individual, one-on-one. Follow-up sessions tend to be in groups, be a group of people that took the personal instruction on the first day, come together on the second day. And we're going to discuss our experiences. And then what will happen is your teacher will teach you exactly what is happening. We'll go through all the possible experiences you can have during a meditation session. And your teacher is going to explain why you're having this experience and what's going on. And basically, your teacher is going to put your mind at ease. And that is, I would say, when you learn TM, 10% of learning TM is that personal instruction. 90% of a TM course is that second part. Making sure your mind is at ease. Making sure you understand every single possible experience that can happen to you. Why? Because if something happens during your meditation session, you have a particular experience, but oh, okay, that's part of the normal, natural process, then your mind is at ease. And your mind say, oh, it's okay. And it means you're not going to worry about, am I doing it right or wrong? Because the moment you start worrying, that will be the moment when you start trying to meditate. If you worry you're not doing it right, you're going to try to do it right. And that's the moment when the natural technique gets lost. Right? So 90% of teaching TM is making sure that everybody understands every experiences that we have. And you can only do that after they've had the experience. That's why there's a particular formula to teach this technique that Maharishi developed like 60 years ago. And Every single one of the 10 million people that learn TM today has been taught according to that exact same formula. And the formula is that we give somebody an experience and then we explain what's happening. And then we give them more experience and more explanation, more experience, more explanation. That's why we're doing follow-up session the next 3 days. And another follow-up session after 2 weeks, because then you've had like 2 weeks of meditation practice, or 10 days or 2 weeks. And then you'll have some more experiences that, we have to explain exactly what's going on. So that's it. Here in this, the learning TM part, you really will learn everything you will need to know to practice it for the rest of your life. But it doesn't mean we're done. No, this is actually just a start. The next part of a TM course is the next 6 months, what we call a follow-up program. Right? That includes personal follow-up, where you come back to your TM teacher back in one-on-one session, where your teacher checks if he meditates with you. We go through some of the procedures, and he checks if you're still doing it correctly. And if something is going wrong, and that happens quite often. Why? Because we're human beings and we forget things. And if you learn TM and you've been meditating for a few months and suddenly you forget some of the instructions, then something will start to go wrong, and then it's your teacher's job to correct that and put you back on the right path. And there is no, as you said, I see on the slides, I didn't put like X amount of follow-up sessions because there is no fixed amount. It's completely based on your need. But basically what it comes down to is that when we teach somebody this technique, your teacher is basically giving you a guarantee that he will be there for you as much as you need to make sure it works. And that's different for everyone. Sometimes for some people, 1 or 2 personal follow-up sessions the next 6 months is fine. Some people need 1 a week, because there's some, like I had this, one of my students, I had a student that was suffering from epilepsy attacks regularly. And, she was so confused that we really needed to sit down every week for 3 months before, it got settled. But then, she got an incredible improvement in her epilepsy. When she learned she was stuttering, she could barely speak normally. After 3 months, she was speaking normally again. So she was incredibly grateful. But, some people just need more time and attention. And we don't want to charge extra. We don't do that. We just say, look, there's one course fee. And in that course fee included is a guarantee that basically we will be there for you as much as you need. But the initiative will always come from your side. When do you know it's time to come for a personal follow-up session? When I would say the advice that I always give to my students is when you start to feel like a resentment towards TM, when you start to feel like TM is no longer enjoyable to do, like it becomes kind of a drag to sit down and meditate 20 minutes, that means it's time for a follow-up session with your teacher, because that means there's probably something not quite going right when it's no longer enjoyable to do, right? So then you just contact your teacher and you book a follow-up session. As part of the follow-up program is also that we regularly hold group meditation, group sessions in the TM Center, where you just come together as a group, we meditate together, and then generally afterwards there's a question and answer session where and basically based on those question and answer sessions, it's always an opportunity for a teacher to kind of refresh the points that we brought during the personal instructions, kind of just refresh them. And it's important to do that, to be reminded of all those points, especially the first 6 months, because that's usually the period where it has to settle. At some point, with most people that learn TM during the 6-month program, there's going to be a point where TM becomes almost an as natural part of your daily routine as taking a shower, eating, or brushing your teeth. You're not even thinking about, doing it. Should I do it or not? Do I have a time? Just like you don't think, do I have the time to eat or not? Some things are just essential for life, and you'll see that TM becomes just one of these things. I would almost call it like a positive, like a habit, maybe almost like to put it very extremely, like a positive addiction, where that TM becomes such a part of your routine that if you skip a meditation, you almost start to feel like you skipped a meal. like you feel hungry, you feel like you're missing something. That's really where we would want to get everyone, because once you get there, then we know it's just something that's going to be there for the rest of your life. Right? There's also online group sessions, and these are actually organized every single day, or at least during the weekdays. That you can just log on to an online national TM group meditation, which is a lot of fun to do, and there's always some discussion afterwards also. So the moment you learn TM, you can do those basically for the rest of your life. Now, so the 6-month follow program, that's usually the most intense program, but it still doesn't mean that after 6 months we're done and we say, now we never see you again. No, when we give that guarantee that we help people, with whatever needs they have, TM related, obviously, that guarantee is actually lifelong. That's how it's structured right now. That means that at any time, if you feel like you want to refresh your TM course, you can just participate in a TM refresher course, which is generally for free. You just take a course, it's 2 or 3 hours where we refresh all the points that you do during the learning process. And all my students, I don't just tell them that you can do this. I actually advise them to do it, like generally once a year. It's good to take one of these refresher courses, because people are always amazed at how good their experiences are after they take that course. So it's something good to do regularly. Personal follow-up session just continues. I mean, generally it's a lot less necessary to keep doing that after the first 6 months, but it doesn't mean sometimes people do need it. I regularly have students that learned 10 years ago, and they contact me, say, oh, I feel like I'm struggling a bit with my meditation. Could you give me a checking session? And then we just do that. And there's also, the group sessions. Once you learn, you can keep coming to group sessions. You can keep coming to online group sessions for the rest of your life. So this is the whole course. Now, okay, as we said, the course is an investment. I think in the United States, generally, the cost to learn TM is $980. It can differ from city to city because, TM is it's a non-profit. The TM is a non-profit organization, so it's kind of like a cost-based teaching process. And in some cities, say in Manhattan, in New York, or in Silicon Valley, in San Francisco, just the cost to rent a TM center is going to be higher than somewhere in the Midwest, right? So just based on that, there can be some variation in the price. But generally, the cost is $980 for, in most TM centers, that will be the case. So, it is an investment. It's up to you now to decide if that's going to be an investment that's worthwhile for you. We can only give you the information. You're the only one who can decide that. If you do feel like this is interesting, I want to explore this further, there's a couple of next steps. And the first next step is to attend the Zoom call. Just 20 minutes where, we'll have a question and answer session. So any questions that you may have, we'll answer. But there's also a couple more practical details that I have to share with you relating to, the learning process. There's a couple practical points. If you do have an urgent questions and you wouldn't be able, you'll see above the video here on the website, you'll see the links to the Zoom calls. If you have an urgent question and you can't attend, feel free to email me. It's fine at joachim@sos.life. And then the one thing I still want to do is show you how to book a course, which we're going to do now. Okay, to find your local TM center, you just go to the website, tm.org, click on where to learn, and then, you look wherever you are in the United States right now, and you look for things. So I'll, for example, look for Lexington, Kentucky, where I'm teaching. You click on your local city. You click on, you see all the things here like next intro talk. You don't have to worry about that. Click on book a course, and then you see the course dates. So for example, right now the next 2 course dates here are in May, and you click on book course. That's it. And then you'll get things. You can get the course description to get the exact date. So the personal session in this scale will be on Saturday, May 2nd. And then the follow-up sessions will be Sunday afternoon, Monday, and Tuesday evening, right? So if that's dates that fits with you, you just click book course. If it doesn't work for you, you can always contact us and see if we can make something work. If we have a group of people that, doesn't work for these dates, but we have another date that can work, then we can always arrange that.